She was just a child, a 12-year-old girl, taken in the dead of night. The police were helpless, her parents broken, but the one who didn't give up couldn't speak. He could only follow the scent of love through darkness and fire. A story that proves true loyalty can outshine fear, distance, and even death. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe to Black Stories Matter, because every story here reminds us that love, courage, and faith can bring the lost back home. The night it happened, everything in the Carter mansion gleamed with perfection. The marble floors reflected the golden chandeliers. The smell of vanilla candles filled the hallways. 12-year-old Lily Carter sat on the back porch, laughing as her golden retriever, Marley, chased fireflies around the yard. The sunset painted her hair in strands of gold, and her laughter drifted like music across the open lawn. For a family that had everything: wealth, success, influence, it felt like nothing could ever go wrong. Inside, her parents were still at the dinner table. Andrew Carter, a powerful real estate magnate, scrolled through his phone, ignoring the untouched food on his plate. His wife Claire sat across from him, folding a napkin between her fingers, watching the fading light through the glass doors. "Andrew," she said softly, "her birthday's in 3 days. Did you call the bakery?" He sighed without looking up. "Claire, I've been on calls all day. I'll do it tomorrow." "You said that yesterday." Their voices stayed low, polite, as if arguing too loudly might break the illusion of control they lived under. Neither of them noticed that the laughter outside had quieted. Neither of them noticed that Marley, usually so full of energy, had gone still, his ears perked toward the gate. At 7:42 p.m., the last rays of light slipped below the horizon, and somewhere beyond the wrought iron fence, a dark van idled with its lights off. Lily turned her head toward the sound, a soft hum, a metallic click. "Marley?" she whispered. The dog stood in front of her, fur bristling, growling low in his throat. The noise was subtle, but in the silence of the yard it carried. Before Lily could call for her parents, a hand shot out from the darkness. A rough cloth covered her mouth. Her small body struggled, but within seconds she was lifted off the ground and carried toward the van. Marley barked wildly, lunging forward, but the man kicked him hard in the ribs. The van door slammed, tires screeched on the pavement. The sound echoed through the night, and then there was only silence. The back door burst open. Claire ran out first, followed by Andrew. "Lily," she called, her voice trembling. "Lily, sweetheart." The only answer was the distant echo of the van disappearing down the road. Marley limped toward the porch, whining, his paw leaving streaks of dirt across the marble steps. He nosed at the pink ribbon Lily had dropped. His chest rose and fell rapidly. His golden fur shimmered in the moonlight, but his eyes looked broken. He barked again, sharp, desperate, but the night swallowed the sound. By the time the police arrived, the mansion had turned into a war zone of emotions. Officers moved through the house, radios crackling. The chief detective asked questions, but Claire barely heard him. She sat on the couch clutching Lily's favorite doll, rocking back and forth, whispering her name. Andrew, pale and shaking, tried to sound composed. "You'll find her," he said, his voice cracking. "You have to find her. I'll pay whatever it takes." The detective nodded. "We'll do everything we can, Mr. Carter. But whoever did this planned it. The cameras—" "I know," Andrew interrupted. "They were off for maintenance. Damn it, I should have—" He stopped. His voice broke into silence. Outside, Marley sat by the gate, refusing to move. Rain began to fall lightly, soaking his fur, but he didn't care. His eyes stayed fixed on the dark road, where the van had vanished. He didn't bark anymore. He just waited. Hours turned into days. The Carters offered rewards, hired private investigators, begged for any lead. But every trail ended cold. The police had nothing, no fingerprints, no witnesses, no ransom call. It was as if Lily had been erased from the world. Inside the once lively house, silence became a presence. Claire barely slept. Andrew locked himself in his office, surrounded by newspapers and reports. Their wealth, their power, it meant nothing now. They couldn't buy back their daughter, but there was one who hadn't given up. Marley had stopped eating, yet he remained restless. He wandered the grounds, sniffing corners, staring at the horizon as if waiting for a signal only he could sense. Every night he went to Lily's room, curled up beside her empty bed, and whined softly before dawn. One night, while the rain battered against the windows, Marley lifted his head sharply. His ears twitched. He sniffed the air, and something changed in his eyes, an instinct, a trace. He stood, tail low, posture tense. Without hesitation, he padded to the door, pushed it open with his nose, and slipped into the storm. Claire stirred from her half-sleep on the couch when she heard the faint jingle of his collar fade into the distance. "Marley?" she whispered, but the sound of rain drowned her voice. The golden retriever ran through the dark streets, paws splashing in puddles, following something only he could smell. Each gust of wind carried faint traces of what he'd been waiting for, a familiar scent. Lily's scent. At the edge of town, Marley stopped. He looked ahead at the forest line, black against the lightning-streaked sky. Somewhere beyond those trees, a faint echo of his girl's scent lingered. He whined, low and mournful, then took a step forward. Behind him, the Carter mansion loomed like a ghost, its windows glowing faintly in the rain. Inside, Claire woke Andrew in a panic. "Marley's gone," she said, trembling. He just ran off." Andrew rubbed his face, exhausted. "He'll come back," he muttered, but she shook her head, staring out at the storm. "No," she whispered. "He's looking for her." And as thunder rolled through the valley, Marley disappeared into the night, guided only by the scent of the one he loved more than life itself. The light of the Carter home faded behind him, swallowed by darkness. But for Marley, it was only the beginning. The storm had quieted by dawn, but the earth still dripped with the memory of rain. The forest ahead was dark, tangled, and endless. Yet Marley did not hesitate. His fur was heavy with mud, his paws raw from the gravel, but his nose caught a faint trace in the air that burned like a promise. It was Lily's scent, fragile yet persistent, clinging to the wind like a whisper of her voice. He pushed forward through thorns and wet leaves, guided by instinct. Every step carried the weight of devotion, not reason. He didn't know why humans had taken her or where they'd gone. He only knew that she was out there, afraid, and that he had to reach her. Miles away, in a decaying farmhouse deep in the woods, Lily sat in a small, dimly lit room. Her wrists were sore from the ropes that bound them. The air smelled of mildew and cigarettes. Through a crack in the boarded window, she could see a thin strip of morning sky. She didn't cry anymore. Tears had come and gone in the first night. Now she simply whispered to herself, "Marley's coming. He'll find me. He always finds me." One of the kidnappers, a man with greasy hair and hollow eyes named Rick, walked in holding a paper bag. "Eat," he grunted, tossing it on the table. The other, his partner Vince, leaned against the doorframe, checking his phone. "No one's called yet," Vince muttered. "You sure her folks are going to pay?" Rick smirked. "They will. People like that. They think money fixes everything. They'll pay to get their little princess back." Lily flinched at the word princess. Her stomach twisted with fear, but she didn't show it. Instead, she looked down at her hands and thought of Marley, the way he used to nudge her when she cried, the way he'd rest his head on her knees when she was scared. That memory became her shield. Back at the Carter estate, Claire sat in the living room, surrounded by photos of Lily. She hadn't slept in 3 days. On the table were cold cups of coffee and untouched food. Andrew stood at the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and desperate. "I don't care how much it costs. I want every inch of that forest search," he said. "She's out there, and someone knows where." When he hung up, he noticed Marley's leash still hanging by the door. For the first time, he realized the house was too quiet. Even in grief, they had lost another member of the family. Claire noticed his silence. "What?" He pointed at the leash. "He's gone." She followed his gaze, her breath catching. No, Andrew. You don't think..." But before he could answer, her eyes filled with tears. She understood. Marley wasn't running away. He was running toward something. In the forest, hours passed. Marley's paws bled, but he didn't stop. The scent had grown stronger now, mixed with smoke and rusted metal. He followed it to the edge of an old railway bridge. Beneath it, An abandoned road wound through the woods, forgotten by everyone except the wild things that crept through it at night. He paused, sniffing the ground. The scent of Lily was faint but real. He could smell the sweetness of her shampoo, the cotton of her sweater. He barked once, low and sharp, as if to tell the wind he was close. Then in the mud he saw something, a torn piece of cloth pink, damp and frayed. He pressed his nose to it and whimpered softly. It was part of her dress. The memory hit him hard, the day she wore it at the park, laughing, running through the fountain while her parents watched from a bench. That was the scent of safety, of joy, and now it was mixed with fear. Marley picked it up gently in his mouth and began to move faster. Night fell again. The kidnapper's hideout flickered with the yellow light of a single bulb. Vince paced, anxious. "We've been here too long," he muttered. "The longer we wait, the hotter it gets. What if someone saw us?" Rick leaned back in his chair. "Relax. Nobody's coming. It's the middle of nowhere." But outside, hidden in the shadows of the trees, someone was coming. Marley crouched low, eyes locked on the faint light spilling through the cracks in the wooden walls. His breath came slow and steady. Every instinct in him was alive. He could smell her. He could hear her faint sobs, her trembling breaths. He stepped forward, one paw at a time, until he reached the porch. The boards creaked under his weight. Inside, Lily's head lifted suddenly. She froze, holding her breath. "Marley?" she whispered, barely audible. Rick looked up from his cigarette. "What did you say?" Lily shook her head quickly. "Nothing." But her heart began to race. Somewhere beneath the floorboards of fear and silence, hope flickered again. By midnight, the storm returned. Lightning flashed through the trees, illuminating the shape of a golden retriever crouched beneath the window. Rain drenched his fur, but his eyes never left the house. He barked once quietly, more a cry than a call, and then pressed his paw against the wall as if to say, "I found you." Inside, Lily pressed her hand against the boards where the sound had come from. Her small fingers trembled, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. But Marley couldn't get in. Not yet. He circled the house, searching for a way. The air smelled of gasoline and mold, but beneath it all, her scent was pure and strong. He would wait. He would guard. Far away in the Carter mansion, Claire woke from a nightmare with a start. She swore she'd heard a bark echo through her dream, clear as day. She went to the window and stared into the storm, her heart whispering the same words as her daughter. He'll find her. At dawn, the forest was still. Rick and Vince slept in their chairs, the radio faintly hissing beside them. Inside the small room, Lily sat awake, her hands free from the ropes she'd managed to loosen in the night. Her heartbeat raced, not from fear but from faith. Outside, Marley lifted his head, his golden fur shining faintly in the weak sunlight. His nose twitched. The wind shifted, and the scent of his girl came stronger now, clearer, as if guiding him toward the moment that would decide everything. He stood up, shook the water from his coat, and began to move. The trail was no longer just a path. It was a lifeline, and Marley was ready to follow it until his last breath. The night had fallen heavy and still, pressing against the trees like a breath held too long. The old farmhouse where Lily was being held creaked under the weight of silence. Inside, one dim bulb flickered, throwing thin shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Rick was asleep in the chair by the window, a half-burned cigarette resting between his fingers. Vince lay on the couch, snoring softly, one hand hanging off the edge, a gun glinting beside him. Outside, the forest waited, and so did Marley. He crouched low near the broken fence, his eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. His chest rose and fell with slow, silent determination. For hours, he'd circled the house, memorizing every sound. The way the floorboards creaked, the angle of the door, the smell of metal and fear. Now the wind had shifted, and he could smell her more clearly than ever. Lily was close. A soft whimper escaped him, but he caught himself. He had to be quiet. Instinct guided every muscle, every step. He slipped through the gap beneath the porch and pressed his body to the ground, waiting until the right moment. Then lightning flashed across the sky. For a second, the world turned white, and Marley moved. He climbed through the broken cellar window, landing softly on dirt. His paws sank into the cold ground as he crept toward the stairs. Above, he heard the muffled voice of a child. His heart, if a dog's heart could speak, was calling her name. Upstairs, Lily had drifted into a restless sleep, her small body curled on the floor. When the thunder rolled, she stirred, and then froze. There it was again, a sound, faint but familiar, the soft padding of paws, a low whine. Her eyes shot open, heart pounding. She turned her head toward the door and whispered, "Marley?" The door creaked. A shadow slipped through the crack, silent as breath. Then a golden shape appeared, mud-caked, rain-soaked, trembling. When she saw him, her lips parted, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. "Marley," she gasped, crawling forward, tears spilling down her face. He pressed his muzzle to her cheek, whining softly. His fur was wet and cold, but to her it was the warmest thing in the world. She buried her face in his neck, sobbing quietly so as not to wake the men. "You found me," she whispered. "I knew you would." Marley pulled back slightly, looking at the ropes still around her wrists. He began to chew at them, gently but firmly. His teeth tore the rough fibers until the knots began to loosen. Lily bit her lip, holding back a cry of pain as the rope rubbed her skin raw. Then with one last pull, it snapped. But as she freed her hands, a sound from downstairs froze them both. Footsteps. Rick mumbled something, shifting in his chair. "Vince, what was that?" "Probably the storm," Vince groaned. But Marley's body had gone rigid. His ears flattened, his tail stiffened. He stood between Lily and the door, his muscles tensed. Rick stood up, scratching his head, and began to climb the stairs. Each creak of wood echoed like a countdown. Lily clutched Marley's collar, whispering, "Hide!" But he didn't move. He stood his ground, head lowered, a growl rumbling deep in his chest. The door swung open. Rick blinked into the room. "What the—" Marley lunged. The impact knocked Rick backward into the wall. His shout turned into a snarl of pain as Marley's teeth sank into his arm. The gun fell from his hand and slid across the floor. The sound jolted Vince awake downstairs. "Rick, you good?" "Get up here," Rick shouted, struggling. Marley released his grip, growled again, and darted toward the gun. Lily dove for it, kicking it under the bed just as Vince charged up the stairs. "Kid," Vince barked, "stay where you are." But Lily grabbed a piece of wood from the floor and swung it as hard as she could, hitting him across the knee. Vince roared in pain, stumbling. Marley leapt again, knocking him down. The struggle was chaos. Shouts, growls, thunder outside. Vince reached for the gun, but Marley was faster. He clamped his jaws on Vince's wrist, twisting until the man screamed. "Get him off!" Vince cried. Rick lunged, but Lily hurled the oil lamp across the room. It shattered against the wall, flames bursting to life. The men recoiled, shouting curses as fire began to spread up the old wood panels. "Run, Marley!" she cried. The dog barked once, the sound sharp and alive, and followed her through the smoke. They burst out of the room just as the roof cracked with the first wave of fire. Lily stumbled down the stairs, coughing, her small hand gripping Marley's fur. Behind them, the kidnappers scrambled to save themselves, shouting for help that would never come. Outside, rain poured again, hissing as it met the heat of the burning house. The fire glowed against the night sky like a warning to the world. Marley and Lily sprinted through the mud, smoke trailing behind them. But a gunshot shattered the air. Lily screamed. The bullet missed her, but struck Marley in the side. He yelped, collapsing for a moment, his fur stained with crimson. "No! Marley!" she cried, dropping to her knees. He struggled to rise, his eyes meeting hers, pained but determined. He pressed his nose to her hand as if to say, "Keep going." Lily shook her head, sobbing. "I can't leave you." He barked once sharply and pushed her leg with his muzzle. He was telling her to run. Another gunshot cracked through the storm. This time she obeyed. She ran through the trees, tears blurring her vision, clutching the ribbon from his collar that had come loose in her hand. Marley followed, limping, blood soaking his side. Every step burned, but the thought of her being alone hurt more. The forest seemed endless. Twisting paths, slippery rocks, broken branches. Behind them, Sirens began to echo faintly. Someone had seen the fire. Help was coming. Lily fell once, scraping her knees, but Marley nudged her up again. His breath came heavy, ragged. He was fading fast, yet his eyes never lost focus. He was leading her home. Hours later, the rain finally stopped. The moonlight broke through the clouds, revealing the outline of a distant road. Headlights glimmered faintly, police cars rushing toward the flames behind them. Lily turned to Marley, her face streaked with mud and tears. "We made it," she whispered. He stood beside her, trembling, his legs giving out beneath him. He collapsed onto the wet grass, breathing shallowly. "No, no, Marley," she cried, cradling his head in her arms. "Stay with me, please." In the distance, sirens grew louder. Voices shouted her name. "Lily! Lily Carter!" She screamed back. "Here! I'm here!" When the rescuers reached them, the girl was clutching the dog tightly, refusing to let go. "He saved me," she said over and over as paramedics lifted Marley onto a stretcher. "He found me. He saved me." As the ambulance sped toward the city, lights flashing through the rain, Marley lay wrapped in blankets beside her. His breathing was weak, but when Lily's hand found his paw, his tail moved faintly. One slow, faithful wag. The world blurred around them. Sirens, shouts, tears. But in the midst of chaos, there was only one truth. Love had followed the trail, fought through darkness, and found its way home. And though dawn had not yet come, Lily knew the light was already on its way. The first light of morning crept over the valley like a fragile breath after a nightmare. It had rained all night, and now the world seemed to glisten with exhaustion and renewal. The road leading back to the Carter mansion was lined with police cars and flashing lights, their colors reflected in the puddles on the asphalt. The air smelled of smoke from the burned farmhouse miles away, the place where everything had nearly ended, and yet somehow begun again. Inside the ambulance, Lily sat with her knees pulled to her chest, wrapped in a thermal blanket. Her hands trembled not from cold, but from disbelief. Across from her lay Marley, his golden fur matted with blood, an oxygen mask fitted gently over his muzzle. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven rhythm. Every time it lifted, Lily whispered his name softly, as if her voice could keep him alive. When the ambulance turned into the long driveway of the Carter estate, the girl's eyes widened. Police officers stood along the entrance. Reporters crowded behind barricades, and at the very front her parents. Claire was clutching Andrew's arm, her face pale and streaked with tears. When the doors of the ambulance opened, she ran forward before anyone could stop her. "Lily!" she screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of fear and relief. The girl stumbled out, her legs weak, and fell into her mother's arms. Claire clung to her, crying uncontrollably. Andrew stood frozen for a moment, unable to move, until finally his composure shattered. He dropped to his knees beside them, holding both his daughter and his wife as if afraid they might vanish again. "I thought I lost you," Claire whispered. Lily shook her head. "You didn't lose me, Mom. Marley found me." The words hit like lightning, simple, pure, and miraculous. Claire turned toward the ambulance where the paramedics were carrying Marley out on a stretcher. His breathing was faint, and his fur shimmered under the morning sun. Claire reached out, her hand trembling as she stroked his paw. "You brave boy," she whispered. "You brought her back to us." The hours that followed felt like a blur. Hospitals, doctors, flashing lights, whispered prayers. Marley was rushed into emergency care. The bullet had lodged near his ribs and his heart had weakened from blood loss. They told the Carters that the next 24 hours would decide everything. Lily refused to leave his side. She sat by the small window of the veterinary ward, watching him through the glass, her eyes swollen from crying. Nurses brought her food, but she barely touched it. She pressed her hand against the cold pain and whispered, "Please wake up. You can't leave me now. You're my hero." Andrew stood behind her, silent. He had spent his life buying solutions, commanding results, but now for the first time, he realized there were things no money could control. His fortune could not buy courage. It could not buy loyalty, and it certainly could not buy the love of a creature who had walked through hell just to bring his daughter home. Claire sat beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. He saved her, she said quietly. We owe him everything. Andrew nodded. I know. His voice cracked. I'd trade everything I own if it would give him one more breath. Night fell softly over the hospital. The world outside was quiet again, and a faint breeze moved through the trees. In the sterile light of the ward, Marley's chest rose faintly. The monitors beeped in slow, irregular rhythm. The nurses had dimmed the lights and left the family alone with him. Lily sat close, her small hand on his paw. Remember the park? She whispered. The lake? How you used to steal my shoes and bury them under the tree? She smiled weakly through tears. You can't go yet, Marley. You still have to walk me to school again. You promised. Her voice broke, and she laid her head against his chest. The faint beat beneath her ear was the most beautiful sound she had ever known. For a moment it stopped. Then it started again, weak but steady. Claire gasped, covering her mouth. Andrew leaned forward, his heart hammering. The machine beeped faster. Marley's paw twitched just slightly. His eyes fluttered open. Mom! Lily cried. He's awake! The retriever blinked, confused, his gaze landing on the girl. When he saw her face, his tail moved once slow, tired but unmistakable. Lily burst into tears and hugged him carefully, afraid to hurt him. You found me, she whispered. You saved me. Marley let out a soft, broken sound, half sigh, half bark, and rested his head on her lap. The fight was over. He had done what he set out to do. Days passed. The news spread like wildfire. Hero dog saves kidnapped child. Cameras crowded outside the hospital. Reporters begged for interviews. But the Carters refused the spotlight. This was not a story of wealth or fame. It was a story of faith, the kind that runs deeper than fear, stronger than death itself. When Marley was finally well enough to return home, the family threw open the gates of the mansion for the first time in weeks. The garden where it had all begun was alive again. The flowers in bloom, the air warm with summer. The police returned the torn pink ribbon they'd found in the woods, the same one Marley had carried in his mouth. Andrew had it framed above the fireplace, a symbol of what love could endure. One morning, a month later, the mayor arrived at the Carter home. The entire community gathered as Marley sat on the front lawn, his golden coat shimmering in the light. A blue ribbon with a silver medal hung around his neck, for bravery beyond measure. As the crowd applauded, Lily knelt beside him, her hand resting gently on his head. He looked up at her with calm, wise eyes, the kind that had seen both darkness and dawn. She smiled through tears. You didn't just save my life, Marley. You saved all of us. That night, as the sun dipped below the hills, the family sat together on the porch. The world felt different now, quieter, humbler. The mansion, once a symbol of power, now felt like a home again. Lily leaned against her mother. Do you think Marley knew that I was still alive? Claire brushed her daughter's hair back gently. I think he never doubted it. He just followed his heart until it led him back to you. Andrew looked out over the horizon, his voice soft. Sometimes the purest love doesn't need words. It just knows. Marley lifted his head, watching the fading light. The wind carried the faint scent of lilac and earth. Somewhere far away, a single bird sang. He rested his muzzle on Lily's lap again, content, his tail tapping lightly against the porch. And as the stars began to appear one by one, Lily whispered, You're my guardian angel, Marley. The night wrapped around them in peace. The storm was gone. The fear had passed, and the world, and for the first time in so long, felt safe again. The golden retriever had followed the scent of love through darkness, pain, and fire, and in the end, he had brought light back to the world that had almost lost it.